In just the past few days, 4 school districts in St. Louis and St. Charles County sent letters home to parents that many found alarming. The letters weren't about grades or discipline, but radiation. They laid out emergency plans for a potential worst-case scenario at the Westlake landfill where nuclear waste is buried and a nearby underground reaction is generating heat. Tonight, what are the risks? Should people near Westlake be worried? Stay tuned.
So we're going to do the show.
Stay Tuned brings together local experts, journalists, civic leaders, and regular people to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Add your voice to our conversation, and you're at the table as we stay on top of current events and go deeper, bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. From the 9 network of public media in Grand Center, this is Stay Tuned. 15 to the roll. 45. So this is a wide-ranging topic that has generated some concern, some fear. So we want to be accurate tonight, and we want to be as thorough as we possibly can. So we're starting with Jacob Barker from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, who's been covering this story for over a year now. Thank you for being with us, Jacob. So let's maybe back up just a second, because for some people this may be an issue, a topic, even if they live relatively close by to Westlake landfill, that they hadn't paid too much attention to until these letters went out from the local schools telling people they had a plan in place for a worst case scenario. So back us up. This is just north of 70, west of 270, where you've got nuclear waste from where? How did it get there in the first place?
It's from early uranium processing activities that took place in St. Louis for the Manhattan Project, which is what created the first atomic bomb.
World War II era stuff we've got buried out there.
Yeah, and it was illegally dumped there in the 70s by a contractor that was supposed to dispose of it. They dumped it in the landfill. Eventually, the EPA and other parties figured out that it was there, and it's been sitting there. People have known about it for decades. It's really since this fire, underground chemical reaction, people differ on what you call it, has started in the last couple of years that it's really raised the profile.
So around 2010 or so, people found out about this. There's the adjacent Bridgeton landfill. They're all kind of right there next to Westlake and Bridgeton or next to each other under the Bridgeton landfill. Like you said, people differ. It's not technically a fire because I guess there's not oxygen getting to it, but nevertheless, there is heat, and it may or may not be moving toward that nuclear material at the Westlake site.
That's right. That's the concern, and the thing is, nobody really knows what would happen if this, fire, underground heat event interacts with the nuclear waste in the Westlake landfill.
And the Attorney General just came out, in addition to the concern that these emergency plans may be generated, the Attorney General just came out with a report that says, in fact, he believes this fire, for lack of a better word, is moving toward the nuclear waste.
He has said that. The State Department of Natural Resources and some of their consultants have said they believe indicators show that the fire is moving north towards the Westlake landfill. However, the owner of the site, Republic Services, they are adamant that they have it under control. They've spent millions of dollars putting in infrastructure and things that's supposed to reduce the heat level in the landfill, and they say they have it under control. So you've got two sides. They're in litigation with each other, so it's hard to tell, when you have that kind of he said, she said.
And you mentioned the EPA. Even the EPA doesn't always agree with other agencies. The EPA says what most recently about this situation?
Well, the EPA has said, not in the last month or two, but has said they think, that the fire is contained. It's not, moving north towards Westlake at this point. And that's kind of the latest.
So what do we make of the fact that in the last just a few days, we've had not only the school districts have put out emergency plans, but also it became public knowledge that for the past year or so, the county, St. Louis County, had an emergency plan that included phrases like worst case scenario of a radioactive plume spreading over the. Is there something to make of these plans becoming public? Does this mean the situation is changing in any way?
Well, the county executive, Steve Stenger, says no, the fact that this emergency plan has been released doesn't mean anything has changed. He says they released it because they were asked for it by the media, and they wanted to show that they're thinking about worst-case scenarios, and that's the only reason it's been released. They've been talking about putting that plan together. It just hasn't, a copy of it hadn't been available, but they've been talking along with fire districts in the area, the county, the Department of Natural Resources, EPA, Republic Services. They've all been talking about putting this, plan together just in case. So it's been out there, and it's a year old, actually. It was complete in 2014.
And you mentioned what happens if this heat fire reaches the nuclear material. Do we know? Has anyone given a definitive answer, or do any two agencies agree on what will or will not happen? There have been some scary language out there when people talk about what may or may not happen.
Yeah, what was contained in the county plan, that seems to be what really kind of raised the profile of this and kind of scared a lot of people. But the EPA has not really said, what would happen if the fire reaches the radioactive waste. They have given some details on what they think might happen. They say it would probably increase radon gas. If anything, they've said they don't think the actual radioactive material, radon would be a byproduct of the material that's there, the uranium and the thorium. But they've said they don't believe the actual radioactive material would be spread by, a plume of smoke or steam or gas.
And just to be really clear, is there any chance of an explosion?
EPA has said they do not believe there's a chance for explosion. They have said they think there could be a risk if the fire reaches there for radioactive material to be spread via groundwater. That appears to be more of a concern than aerial transport. And other scientific experts have said that as well.
And of course, a lot of people, in your reporting, you found, yes or no, that people are happy with the EPA?
There's a lot of frustration with the EPA just because, I guess, of how long they have had jurisdiction over this site and the seeming lack of progress. The EPA in 2008 came up with a proposed decision, a proposed remedy for what to do, and they proposed covering the Westlake landfill. And people did not like that idea. They thought if you cover it, it could still leave via the groundwater. They wanted it removed. Most people in the area want to see it removed. And so the EPA took a step back and said, all right, we'll re-examine this. But that was in 2008. That was 7 years ago. People are, understandably frustrated.
And of course, this story, it seems like there are never any simple answers. There's even risk involved with removing nuclear waste in terms of transport and things like that people bring up as well. So there never seems to be a cut and dry answer from any angle you look at it.
Well, there's concern about, if you dig it up, there's the airport, Lambert Airport, is concerned if you dig it up, there could be birds attracted to the landfill that might put flights in danger because of birds. It backs up pretty close to the airport. The Bridgeton landfill actually closed to accommodate the new runway at Lambert Airport. So.
Okay, a lot more to discuss, including a very personal, some personal perspectives on this. I want to make just one last point before we move forward. There's also, there are other radioactive storylines in the St. Louis area, one of which is Coldwater Creek. Just to be clear, these are two separate issues, Westlake and Coldwater, correct?
They're two separate issues. The underlying waste and the processing activities during World War II kind of connects it all, though.
But for tonight's purposes, we're focusing on Westlake. Just want to make sure that folks are clear. Okay, so every week we have a Twitter chat on Tuesdays that helps inform this show and guide us. Let's take a look at what you had to say earlier this week.
For Tuesday night's Stay Tuned Twitter chat, we discuss citizen reaction and concern about radioactive contamination sites in North County, specifically the Bridgeton and Westlake landfills and Coldwater Creek. There are worries on all sides of the situation. Casey Hinton fears that there has been a lack of real leadership on all levels and says nobody knows the true extent of what's going on. Since it's not in Ladue, fewer care. Twitter user @Momentator said there's a risk involved in digging up some of the waste and moving it through the county, rural Missouri, where I live. She also had concerns about leadership, adding, our leaders are confusing things. EPA needs to cap the Westlake landfill. @Pubpole Wonk thinks that political leadership has been influenced by outside forces. They said it's no secret who is behind the campaign to say it's not that bad, and their connections to local politics is dangerous. This is a looming region-wide emergency. It needs to be handled by officials not influenced by machine politics and cronies, they said.
Well, do you want to be a part of our next chat? Follow us on Twitter @StayTunedSTL and join the conversation on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Use the hashtag StayTunedSTL. Thanks to everyone who joined us this week. Okay, joining Jacob and me at the table, Robin Daly, a citizen activist you have become now around this issue, and also Russ Naki, a director of field communications and public affairs at Republic Services. Of course, Republic Services, the owner of Bridgeton Landfill,
Correct.
which is right next door. So thank you for being here to both of you. Robin, I'll start with you. We've talked a lot about the nuclear aspect of this. I just want to back up for a second. What is your biggest concern as a resident who lives how close to Westlake Landfill?
Less than half a mile.
Less than half of a mile. What is your biggest concern?
The fire hitting the rad waste. Anytime you've got fire and rad waste in the same sentence, something's not right. It just does not work. And that is my biggest concern, and that is what our biggest concern has been for a while, is that rad waste sitting there in Westlake, and Bridgeton's got a fire in it.
How long have you been involved with this?
I say around 2011. The fire became rather public around 2010. And then I was involved with a class action odor nuisance lawsuit against Republic Services because of the odors coming from Bridgeton Landfill. And since that time, I've been involved ever since.
And what have those last 4 years or so been like?
It's been a roller coaster ride from HELL. We don't know when we can open our windows. If you open your windows, then pretty soon here comes a waft of it. I live in an area where there are hills and valleys, and so air has a tendency to swirl. So where you may not smell it in one part of the neighborhood, you can in the other part of the neighborhood. So we have difficulty making plans outdoors. Even a simple thing as hanging Christmas lights. My husband had to put on a respirator to hang Christmas lights. I took a picture of that and posted it to let people know this is exactly what we have to deal with every day, whether it's cutting grass, trying to enjoy the outdoors, trying to have some fresh air, so to speak, fresh air come through the window, as fresh as it can be. And it's just that our quality of life has just been taken away, I feel like.
So while the interaction with heat and nuclear material looms as a possibility, the smell is a real and present problem.
Yes, it's almost like it's a perk.
The smell is a perk on the problem.
Yes, perk to the problem. As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing good coming out from that landfill. I don't care what anybody says, I totally emphatically disagree. There isn't anything good coming out of the air of it, not out of the gas flares. They're supposed to be putting out 250 tons approximately per year of SOx sulfur compounds. None of that stuff is good for you. It's not going to really kill you, but it still makes it difficult for people to breathe, it exasperates asthma. Some people have had spontaneous nosebleeds. My husband suffers from COPD, so he gets very distressed and has difficulty moving when the stench is very thick.
Russ Robin is just one of a fairly significant number of people who have organized around this issue. I know you've heard these issues before. I'm curious. Just there are a lot of technical terms we can get into.
Sure.
Would you want to live in this area?
It's actually Spanish Village and Bridgeton. It's a phenomenal community. You know, one of the concerns we have is what this hysteria is actually doing for Bridgeton and the future of Bridgeton. At some point, with the level of hysteria that is being thrown around, you know, the notion of what could actually happen to property value is a real and fair question to ask. The notion of would other businesses want to come into Bridgeton? You know, we employ 450 people in Bridgeton, and we're proud to be a part of Bridgeton, and we believe Bridgeton's brightest days are to come. But you do have to ask, when all of these allegations and all of this hysteria is thrown around, and some of it is you know, borderline fear-mongering, with all due respect. You do have to question, what does that mean for Bridgeton's future? And it's you asked Robin her biggest concern. I would say at present, that's our biggest concern.
You say fear-mongering, but some of it comes from the Attorney General's office and other official capacities.
I'm glad that you bring that up. So in early September, the Attorney General had state experts that were required, based on a court schedule, to produce to Bridgeton Landfill, who the Attorney General has brought litigation against, the type of work that their experts are working on in anticipation of what Bridgeton Landfill could see in court. That trial date is currently scheduled for March. As part of that court schedule, Bridgeton Landfill is also expected by the court to do the same, to produce state expert reports, which it will do by the end of October, early November. At which point, Bridgeton Landfill will address all of the issues that the Attorney General raised. I think the expert reports that the Attorney General produced in September are fundamentally flawed in a number of ways. Happy to unpack some of those if you'd like.
Well, I think, is it fair to say that all parties can agree that there is nuclear waste and there is, whether you call it a fire or a chemical reaction or something generating heat, in close proximity to each other?
Bridgeton Landfill and Westlake Landfill are adjacent to one another. Bridgeton Landfill has an exothermic reaction that it's occurring at about 200 feet of depth in the South Quarry, furthest most location from where the known radiologically impacted material is in Westlake Landfill. Yeah, we can absolutely agree on that. We could also agree on the fact that there was odor. There absolutely was odor in 2012, particularly in 2013 and 2014. I think where Robin and I would disagree is the state of that odor today. Today, 1 in 10 odor concerns that are received simply those are found to be associated with Bridgeton Landfill generally. The other 9 out of 10 are found to be associated with other industrial facilities or the largest active landfill in the state of Missouri, which is all in that immediate area.
And the odors that can be attributed to Bridgeton, are those related to the heat underground?
That 1 in 10, yes. It's generally attributed to the reaction and more specifically site improvements, whether it's repairing a gas wellhead or doing something specific to the leachate pretreatment facility. Generally speaking, when we see that 1 in 10 odor, odor complaint that we can say, yeah, that's likely attributable to Bridgeton, it is the result of the reaction.
Okay, so you said that is your biggest concern as well, as the nuclear, the rad waste, as Robin says, and the heat.
Actually, I said my biggest concern is the future of Bridgeton and kind of what all of this might mean for the future of Bridgeton. Bridgeton's had a rough go since the 80s, with the airport expansion, as I think, was mentioned earlier. It was hit really hard with the economy, I think particularly hard relative to other places in greater St. Louis. We are proud to be our St. Louis operation is based in Bridgeton. We operate 400 collection trucks out of there every day. We employ 450 people. We're a huge economic engine, not only in St. Louis, but particularly in Bridgeton. And when you start to have, this level of fear and anxiety that, and oftentimes the flames of that fear and anxiety is fanned, unfortunately, by rhetoric rather than science, you do have to start wondering, what does this mean? And so that's our biggest concern.
So is there something you can do to mitigate this, this heat that might mitigate this fear and that might mitigate this rhetoric you're talking about?
Well, so we believe we're doing everything within our power, and we feel very confident when we say that Bridgeton Landfill is in a managed state. It's safe. The reaction is isolated to the South Quarry. We are obviously in ongoing litigation with the state of Missouri. The trial is scheduled currently for March. The EPA, specific to Westlake, it has authority over a Superfund site such as Westlake Landfill. We'll have to see what schedule the EPA is on, because ultimately the EPA is going to determine what should happen, what's the best outcome for Westlake Landfill. The EPA in 2008 had proposed a remedy for what should happen. It was essentially a 5-foot layer of rock and clay, and the intention there was to keep groundwater, rain, kind of from entering into, the impacted areas and sort of rolling off. And then it would also prevent any potential release of radon, from going up. So it's sort of a cap. The shelf life of radon is about 3 days. And so it would kind of be, as it progresses north through that 5-foot cap, it would dissipate so that when it hit ground surface level, you would essentially have no, radionuclide, elements or molecules being released into the area.
But Jacob, you mentioned this same remedy earlier. What is the status of that? What might it take a lot of people, and Robin, I believe some of the groups you're associated with have called for the Army Corps of Engineers to get involved in their program that is specifically designed to remediate situations. What is the status of some sort of EPA decision to do something massive and radical? What is the status of the Army Corps getting involved? What does it take? Does it take an act of Congress for the EPA to come in and take this off of Republic's hands?
Well, the EPA says they will propose a remedy by early 2017. I think they were hoping to get it done before the Obama administration moves on and the ranks in EPA are shaken up. We'll see if they get it done by 2017. They're currently doing some more studies to try and determine whether the Bridgeton landfill the edge of the Bridgeton landfill outside of Westlake may have some radionuclides. They want to do a little more studies, a few more studies to see if some of it has spread or was dumped there originally. They also want to do more studies to better characterize what kind of waste is in Westlake. A lot of people have criticized the EPA and the records they rely on from the Department of Energy as being incomplete, as not giving a full accounting of what's actually in the landfill. So the EPA, with Republic Services, they're doing some more studies in the landfill to determine, and that could lead to a remedy being proposed by the EPA.
We have time for more studies, Robin?
Well, before we get to that, I'd like to also address the fact that you spoke about the EPA's suggestion of the cap at the for the 2006 remedy. According to the EPA's own Office of Research and Development, they themselves said that the cap would not be protective of human or environmental health. The cap would crack. The cap would fissure and allow things to come through it.
So you want what to happen? What do you think would be the better remedy?
Well, we would like FOOSRAP to come in, clean it up, and get it out of here like they've been doing with other FOOSRAP sites.
FOOSRAP, if you can do the acronym off the top
That
of your
is the federally
Formerly
utilized. Anyway, it's an Army Corps of Engineers program.
Action sites.
Yeah.
So yeah, Army Corps of Engineers, that's what they've been doing for about 2 decades or so, where they come in and remove. But go ahead, I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page.
Yes, I'm sorry, we talk with a lot of acronyms
That's okay.
because there's so much involved in it, it's much quicker to speak.
Well, and you've been involved in it pretty intimately, too.
Yes. Yes, we'd like them to come in and totally excavate it and remove it. And if they deem that that is unnecessary, that they could not do it, we'll wait and deal with that when we get to that bridge. But we want it to be completely removed. Personally, we're looking for a safe and permanent solution, and that it's not going to be a cap. If it's going to be anything, it's going to be dug out, and you're going to put a liner in it. It is sitting in a porous quarry of limestone, and it sucks it up like a sponge. So we got to keep that stuff out of the groundwater. So you're going to have to excavate it, put in a liner, then go ahead and cap it, as long as we've got that groundwater protected.
If we'd have met in 2010, would you have ever dreamed you'd know this much about rad waste?
Heavens no, I never even thought about it when I moved there in 1999. I didn't even know the thing I was living next to was even there. It's been the best kept dirty secret in St. Louis for decades. And it just slowly dribs and drabs, gets out here and there. Then you get some interest for a couple of years and then it dies down. But this time we've kept at it for almost 5 years. And we're finally seeing some action and awareness with people. People have just gone absolutely berserk since they've received the letters from the schools. Rightly so. They weren't aware of it up until then. At least I gradually was eased in to this impending disaster because the fire wasn't as close when I first found out about it than what it is now. So these poor people that are just finding it out today, it's like they've been hit up alongside the head and they can't get enough information about it quick enough.
Do you ever worry that any of the rhetoric, whether it be from activist groups or elected officials, is too alarming?
It can be. It most definitely can be. I don't know what more to say about that, but it can be. Everybody receives a message differently. So we can only control the message that we deliver. We can't control what anybody else delivers.
Jacob, any more, the reaction she mentioned when the letters went home, more people seem to be aware of it. Where do you see the next few steps? What's your prediction? We have about a minute or so left. What do you see as the next step in this saga?
Well, I do think it's fair to say more people are paying attention now in the last month or so. So whether that galvanizes some action, as Russ mentioned, the trial is scheduled for March with the Attorney General. That could lead to some sort of action in the Bridgeton landfill. Other than that, I think people are waiting for the EPA to make a decision.
Russ, when it goes to court, is it corporate America where you just have to hunker down and play to win, or is there something more you could do to make people at least put them at ease a little bit?
Well, anytime I get an opportunity like this one, I accept it to come on and try to talk, with the community about an alternative perspective that's based in science. The reality is the landfill is safe. It's intensely monitored. The reaction is isolated to the South Quarry. If I could, though, briefly, we had talked a moment ago about FUSRAP. FUSRAP, that Army Corps program, it is a program that really falls in the category of be careful what you wish for. The federal government has funded the FUSRAP program at $100 million a year for the last decade. There are already 22 different sites that are in the FUSRAP program. The top 2 sites combined for their remediation work will cost $800 million. So you can do the math on how much more delay any sort of implementation at Westlake would look like if it were to transfer to the FUSRAP program. That being said, we got no issue with the Army Corps. We work with them on the isolation barrier and all of those, all of those projects. They're wonderful to work with. Our issue isn't with the Corps. It's with the be careful what you wish for. And also, 2008, there was a proposed remedy. Robin and some of her friends and some of the Maryland Heights activists and the Missouri Coalition for the Environment persuaded the EPA to revisit that cap. It only takes 3 to 4 years to implement the cap. We wouldn't be having this conversation today had that not happened.
This is a conversation we will have to continue at another time because it goes even further. Thank you all, though, for bringing us up to speed. Robin, Jacob, Russ, we thank you for your time, and thank you as well. Stay tuned until next time.